Welcome to this session, everybody. I'm Tamar Bauer, a senior advisor with Project Evident, whose mission is to harness the power of data, evidence, and technology for greater impact. In this session, we're going to focus on design for outcomes, one of the 8 areas in the Equitable AI adoption framework that Project Evident co-created with 13 partner nonprofits. Within that area, we'll delve into one of the 4 subtopics, our favorite, the logic model. I'm so looking forward to learning today in this conversation with our 3 amazing expert panelists who know a whole lot about this topic from different perspectives and from deep experience. Scott Del Rossi is the VP of College and Career Success at College Possible, whose mission is to expand college access and college success at scale by pairing great coaches with smart systems so students persist, graduate, and launch their careers. Welcome, Scott. Sam Azar is the founder and CEO of Ascend Impact Advisors, a consultancy helping mission-driven organizations harness AI strategically and responsibly to increase their impact. Welcome, Sam. And Matt Hillard, my colleague and friend, is the Senior Director of Evidence for Outcomes at Project Evident. Matt leads engagements with national nonprofits and philanthropic funders to align their learning and evaluation practices with strategic goals. Welcome all. A moment of housekeeping. We'll do about 30 minutes of panel questions and then about 10 to 15 minutes of your questions, people in the audience. And then I'll explain more about this, but you've probably learned it by now from other panels. We'll move to the lounge where you can have informal one-on-one conversations with the panelists. For now, I just want to remind you, you can put your questions in at any point during the session. And also there are resources in the 5th tab that have been compiled by the speakers and by Project Evident that are relevant to the topics we'll be discussing. Okay, let's move in. I want to start with a visual that just to make sure that we're all on the same page about a logic model. Let's begin with a visual laying out the components of a logic model. Can you put up the slide, please? Well, okay, it's not coming up. Let me see if I can do it myself, but I don't see it here. Well, I'll wait a minute. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So here you see a standard description of the components of a logic model. And you'll see your planned work on the left side, the inputs and the activities. Specifically, the question, how do the inputs drive the activities? And on the right side, you'll see the intended results. What are the direct results of the activities, the outputs, and how are those outputs expected to lead to short-term changes or improvements? And how are those likely to lead to longer-term benefits for participants? It's sort of a weaning out process. I've been involved with a few of these, and it's been very interesting to see how some really fun or seemingly important activities really had nothing to do with what a program that I was working with, what their outcomes were intended to be. So it's a refining and a winnowing process. Thank you. We can take that off now. Now that I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. And Matt, you agree with that description of that you're the boss of the logic model. So hope you agree with what I put up there.
Endorsed. Matt endorsed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Now, turning to all of you, I want to start with the question, how does your program logic model help you distinguish between workflows that AI can automate and those that require human judgment or relationships? And this goes to the heart of the matter. What in the world does a logic model have to do with AI? Sam, can you help me make that connection, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Love that question. Great to be here. So really, what is a logic model? It's not supposed to be something that's just collecting digital dust somewhere or something that you submit at some point to some funder because they asked for it. But it's really supposed to be like this living, breathing document that captures how you believe change happens through your programs. And so if you're really looking at, well, how do we drive change? How do we increase the impact that we're having? The starting point really has to be the logic model for your programs and sort of how your understanding of what works and why is reflected in it. And so, I think, as you delve into and try to think about, oh, where should we prioritize? What should our strategy be for leaning into AI responsibly, strategically, proactively? You really need to take that logic model and combine it with a fresh understanding of, well, what insights do our program participants have for us about what's working for them and why, where they feel stuck, where they want more support. And same for your staff, the practitioners that are working with those participants, is how is it that they feel like they're being held back, and where might there be opportunities to really dramatically increase your impact? And if you sort of walk in with that lens of first barriers and second opportunity, then I think it allows you, and sort of seeing where they land in that logic model, that can really be the starting point for saying, oh, well, here are the priority areas we should look for where there might be a solution, and then say, well, is there an AI shaped problem in here that matches, or AI shaped solution that matches with this problem that we're trying to solve, or this opportunity that we're trying to realize.
Scott, would you share your perspective based on your long experience and deep experience doing this with College Possible?
Absolutely. Our frame of reference and kind of how we entered the work was very serendipitous, and we're very fortunate in a lot of ways, because we were going through just a tremendous amount of change at College Possible when kind of AI exploded on the scene. There was federal funding cuts, loss of AmeriCorps and our staffing model. We were coming out of the pandemic, we had a merger. And so, we were already going through a process of kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle on the board and evaluating, does this get to us? Do any of these activities get to the long-term outcome and our desired impact that we want to have? And so once you kind of, we're already kind of looking at that board with all the puzzle pieces, what AI allowed us to do was just have a different tool or a new tool to begin to apply to some of these problems. Or, Sam, you mentioned like AI-sized problems and AI-sized solutions. And so when we were looking at these things, where it was like, how do we deliver curriculum to 25,000 students? Traditionally, we say that's through our human coaches. Now we said, is this something we can do through AI? That might have been the answer, might be no. But another question might be, we get questions like very frequently, the same questions from students at 11 p.m. at night that our coaches aren't able to often answer, and it's often the same question. In those cases, we were like, okay, this is something that AI absolutely can handle, like asynchronously. That's not only a benefit for the student because they get that immediate response, but that's a benefit for our staffing model because we don't need to have someone on deck or on board answering questions at 11 p.m. And so it added another tool to the toolkit to solve some of these challenges or problems. And that first started by laying out kind of the program components with the logic model and like your theory of change and things.
So both of you really are identifying a problem that existed independent of AI. It was just a problem that you were facing, that an organization was facing, and that you were looking for a solution to. And AI happened to be a solution you could see, but you were starting with a need, a program need. And that program need was connected to something that the logic model laid out as something that needed to be done. That's okay. Thank you. Okay, so Matt, let's go to you. With insights from working with many organizations and philanthropic funders, what are your thoughts on how a program logic model should inform an organization's technology roadmap?
So I think, Tamar, I just want to emphasize and double click on both what Sam and Scott shared. And I think in both of their comments, what I'm hearing is, like, we often hear this concept of the importance of having a human in the loop, which I think, quite frankly, we at Project Evident bristle at a bit, because it's sort of implying that technology is driving and that we need to insert humans into that. But what I'm hearing from Sam and Scott is fundamentally this is human first work. And by framing that in the logic model, then you can sort of see how there's technology in the loop. So it's human first activities that are connected to outcomes. in what ways can technology then support that fundamentally human activity that we're all in this work to accomplish?
I love that. Thank you, Matt. And let me ask you all just a follow-up question, because from my simplistic understanding of this, I wouldn't think that an AI solution would naturally crosswalk to a logic model. It would feel like they were sort of at different levels. So, any thoughts on that? Whoever.
Yeah, sure. I think I can start off, and then either of you, gents, if you want to jump in too, that would be great. Um, maybe an example
That'd be
is
great.
helpful there. I
Thank
think
you.
first is it's not that you're going to look at a line in your logic model and be like, oh, this is the shining AI use case that I need to now pursue. It's more about really getting into sort of what are the ways in which your inputs are connected to activities, connected to outputs, connected to outcomes, and following that through line across, and some of the assumptions and constraints and conditions that are sort of built in to what that flow through that logic model looks like. And so the example, so imagine that there is a nonprofit working on helping those returning from a prison system to be integrated back into society, and they're ultimately looking to have increased economic self-sufficiency post reentry. Now, in order to do that, they might need to make sure that those participants maintain employment with a livable wage. And in order to do that, they need to be placements in living wage job positions. And before that, maybe job placement and career coaching. And tied to that, you need good employer partners. And so if you follow that all the way through of having strong employer partners that you can refer folks to after they complete your programs, the great support through the program, those placements, you can look at, well, where based on what our participants are telling us and what staff are saying, where are the stress points? So maybe it's that in this particular case, this is theoretical, just as an example. Well, maybe it's, oh, if we were to grow the way that we're hoping to, that we're really worried about being able to consistently find those job placements for folks. And so what we need to do is really expand our employer partnerships and be able to have more reliable pipeline. So what does that mean? Maybe that's a place where AI can be part of your outreach strategy and how you cultivate at all parts of the pipeline, someone from being never heard about you to now heard about you, maybe want to explore and then sort of nurture them along, much like you might do with one of your donors, but nurture them along to the point where they're excited about and want to really partner and explore placements. But you can sort of reach out at a scale that's otherwise not possible, and at a marginal cost that's otherwise not possible when you're using AI thoughtfully and responsibly. And so with the same number of staff doing that partnership cultivation and management, with them still in the driver's seat, them still owning that relationship, they can just have a much more robust pipeline and even maybe stay on top of follow-up better, maybe have more personalized messages out there, run more thoughtful campaigns just by, not with just AI, but with AI layered in to effective relationship management practices and a good tech setup.
Super helpful. Thank you. That made it very concrete. I appreciate it. Anything, Scott, Matt, anything else to just add on that level? Any other examples, or Scott, you want to?
Yeah, the only thing I would kind of add to what Sam said, because I really do appreciate kind of the framing of like really understanding like the business or the program need or your stakeholder need to then figure out how to apply the tools appropriately. The kind of reflecting on your question of like, how do we take this like very like ephemeral, like AI as a strategy to like, this is how we're specifically going to deploy it. We've all been on this like great learning journey around AI because we've all been introduced to this topic and now we're trying to learn more about it. I think for me, the application and how to make it more tangible is to learn how other like practitioners are using AI. So then that gives you kind of more sense of like, what are the different actual tools in your toolkit? It's the hammer and the screwdriver or the wrench. And so when you get to those problem solving moments in your program design, you can say, oh, this is a place to use the hammer because I saw this other org use a hammer for a similar problem. Let me do that here. And I would say that's limited, not only limited to like education, but just look at all the different applications of AI that's being used across the world. And that could really build out that toolkit. So when you do see those issues or problems, you're trying to solve for those problems, it's more than just we're going to use AI versus we're going to use this specific like use case of AI that we saw someone else use. And so that to me is how to take kind of that more ambiguous macro kind of strategy around using AI to a much more tangible, this is how we can actually use this for this specific activity in our program when you might not know what you know. And so part of that's, I think, becoming more informed of how it's being deployed in the field.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, Matt, staying with you on the next question. What happens? Let's flip the script a little bit. What happens when an organization leads with AI technology first, so the shiny object thing, to augment program workflows rather than starting with program outcomes? What are the risks? Give us an example and sort of what doesn't work well. We'll do Matt and then Scott and then Sam.
Great. So I think I'll pick back up on sort of the point that both Sam and Scott were making to the previous question, is just that the ability for AI to scale solutions in essentially a frictionless way both has immense opportunity. And by frictionless, I mean the ability to, for example, create a matching algorithm that may have taken individuals, days or weeks to create. You can sort of speak it into existence through AI tools. That the ability to do that so quickly does then come at a risk of basically chasing, Tamar, as you put it, sort of the shiny object, without being super clear of what you are chasing after, sort of like what is the to what end of what you're hoping to achieve. So cautionary tale, we a couple years ago partnered with an organization that was very early in their AI adoption journey. And they were quite excited to embrace a tool that was working to, through the use of generative AI, match students that were coming out of a post-secondary education pathway to potential employers that might hire those students. So they had a core challenge that they were addressing, which was there was a mismatch between what employers were looking for and the skills that students were graduating with. And as a result, there was pretty deep unemployment in this particular area. And what they then did was optimized the generative AI tool for number of matches. So as they conceived of it, success was number of matches between employers and students. Greater matches, greater success. The challenge is they were not taking it one step further, which a logic model would help them think through, which is what is the definition of a successful match? What actually is the to what end of the match? And so what ended up happening is many of those matches fell apart within the ensuing weeks or months because there wasn't a real core sense of what is the sort of the to what end of the matching, which was for employers to have a skilled trained workforce and for students to have jobs that they can grow in and gain additional skills. So sort of absent that other tweak of sort of actually, why are we doing this? Why does matching matter? You're kind of running at sort of the wrong thing.
Yeah, so a theme of wasted and missed opportunity actually from the mismatch. Okay, Scott, do you have a story, an example of this?
Yeah, Matt, it's funny, the example you mentioned, it just reminds me of this like adage or saying where, if you have a bad process or a process that yields like imperfect outcomes or not the outcomes that you want, technology isn't going to inherently like solve that for you. It's just going to get you to the problems faster, or it'll create more problems for you because you're able to do it more quickly and at scale. And so that kind of rings true when you mention that. But I think from our perspective, just as a practitioner, we, like all nonprofits, we struggle with like resources like time, money, people hours, and these are all things that AI you need to invest in order to have good AI solutions. And so there is some sense of kind of that wasted time and money, and just resources if you build the wrong product, or you build a product that isn't actually solving a particular solution for you. But the other one that I would call out is from a kind of a more of a implementation and change management perspective. If you're able to find a problem that you're able to solve with AI, that's so much more easier as a tool to introduce to your organization, to your service population, to be demonstrative of like, here's how this can be successful. And then from that kind of win, you can kind of continue to build on that and launch more like features or tools. But if that first tool is wrong and you get it wrong, that will create kind of that culture of doubt in your organization around, well, AI isn't the right tool, and this isn't replacing my job, and I don't want to use it, and it's costs too much money, or it's going to lead to bad outcomes, so we're never going to use it again. And so it also just has kind of that downstream effect that really can also impact that change management or kind of that culture management around your like product development cycles.
Thank you, Scott. That makes, that's concerning. Let's go to you, Sam. Just
happy to pick up.
Yep.
Happy to pick up there. I think what it gets down to is, I'm not going to say you need a logic model for your logic model. I won't say that. I might have just said that, but I won't say that. But I think you need to be able to really articulate, like, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference between when you're using AI and what you're not? And what's your sort of impact hypothesis of how using AI will increase your impact or create better outcomes? So for example, if I were to go back to the example I used before and build on that one, you could imagine also that maybe this organization that is helping folks re-enter after being in prison, that they may also have a social enterprise as part of what they do, and they do basically transitional employment for folks as they're going through the program, to make sure that they have income to build those soft skills on the job, and that's what happens while they're in their program and before they get to that final sort of more permanent placement post program. You could imagine there being, well, hey, if we can grow this social enterprise in the same way that you might want to grow the set of employer partners, it's a similar pattern, similar type of technology, and to identify leads, sort of usher them through the business development process to have a project or a job with that particular social enterprise, and that's fantastic. And I think this is where, if you look at your logic model and say, well, what does that do for us? If you have plenty of placements for folks going through your programs, then growing the social enterprise, is maybe good, but maybe doesn't help you as much as getting more placements or better placements post-program, which is really where, if you're getting through that program and then you're graduating into a phenomenal job that you can keep and then hopefully grow in your career in, that's going to be much more influential on what those longer term outcomes are than maybe having more interesting projects to be working on while you're in the program. And now it may be flipped. It may be, people are dropping out of our program because they don't have income to sustain themselves and our stipend's not enough, so we need to grow that social enterprise so we can offer them more income so they can complete the program. So you can't just look at the logic model and decide. You have to sort of look at the logic model through the lens of program participant experience, through the lens of practitioner insights about what's really working, what's really not, what's most valuable to them. But if you don't have that logic model as sort of your map of where you need to explore and what you need to look at, it becomes much harder to do and much harder to see the connection between multiple interesting and maybe similar kinds of technology applications, and really decide, well, what is the higher priority?
Excellent. So it's the logic model as a living tool. It helps anchor and guide, and you touch back as people are navigating many many choices, right? Touching base with that document. It's not on the shelf. It's not a dusty thing. It's an active resource to engage with on an ongoing basis. That's okay. If people listening today are inspired to connect the dots between AI and logic models by what each of you has shared so far, let's just help them move along to what is one next step that you would recommend. And we'll start with you, Scott, and then go to Matt and then to Sam.
Yeah, so I'll keep with kind of the similar theme of some of the other responses I've had. I think the first is just educating yourself on the specific use cases of how other orgs are using AI, because I think that just gives you, again, that larger toolkit. And then I think for me, the cheeks, I know you asked for one, but the second one would really be to like map out your logic model. And then for us, we mapped out a service blueprint, which was taking your logic model and bringing it to life. Like, what is the student experience? What are all the workflows attached to each of those activities? Because there you're able to start identifying like challenges that your stakeholders are having, whether it be your students or your coaches. Students can't connect with someone at 11 p.m. at night, and then that you go into your toolkit and say, oh, I heard this other org did this thing where they had blah 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 blah, and you can apply it to that. And so to me, again, it's really getting the pieces of the puzzle out on the table so that you can then begin to identify where those like business challenge or program challenges actually are. And that's when you can begin to apply those various different tools and strategies.
Do we have an example of what a service blueprint? If we have one, we'll add it to our resources. I think that might be useful for people to just see sort of that complex full iteration of the program. Matt, let's go to you.
All right, so I think I'm just going to acknowledge my bias here, and that is a logic model first bias. So, and I think what I'm hearing in this conversation is a real value in getting super clear with your logic model to then inform AI investments and adoption. And so, what I would recommend as basically the single greatest unlock to have that logic model not collect digital dust, I love that, Sam, is to reflect on who in that logic model is being influenced, sort of like who are you seeking to influence in that logic model, and invite them into the conversation to look at that and test it and beat it up and ask you questions. So if you are presuming an outcome for a student, in my example of a graduating student that's really looking for employment in a particular industry, involve them in a focus group to say, hey, here's our presumption of what a successful match looks like. Like, what does success look like to you? In that way, it both informs your outcomes such that you're not just presuming what success looks like, but it also allows folks to be able to see themselves in the logic model, which in my opinion sort of addresses this gap of it collecting dust, because people can really see how their individual work is influencing the causal pathways that are in the logic model. So then when that logic model does not align with the work that they are doing on the ground, that prompts the question of, hey, maybe we should revisit that thing. So it kind of by definition avoids this situation where it just stays static, because it should always be a representation of what folks are bringing to the table and in their work.
I'm going to do a follow-up because we haven't done this yet, but can you just walk us through briefly, how do you build a logic model? How is it done?
Yeah. Okay, so it is a little bit of a choose your own adventure with the logic model. So what I recommend is always start in the place where people have the most certainty. So for example, if your staff members are most clear on what your programmatic activities are, start there, which is sort of, as we think of it, the left side of the logic model, and build to the right through concrete if-then statements. If we do this, then that happens. If you feel as though your staff and folks that you're working with are much more clear of what your desired outcome is kind of like the North Star outcome, I'd recommend starting there and then work backwards from the North Star outcome back into the activities. The one thing I will name is the hardest part of logic model building is what we would refer to as the missing middle, because usually folks are pretty clear of what they're doing on a day-to-day, the activities, and they're pretty clear of what the North Star is through a mission statement and vision. It's really the connecting the dots between that. And so going through the practice of really getting super clear of if this happens, then that is critical. I will also name that this is a great application for AI, to be able to sort of chat with your chosen LLM and kind of tell it the story of an individual program participant going through your program and asking it to translate that into a draft logic model can be a great way to leverage storytelling and put it actually into a logic model framework.
Oh, wow. Super interesting. Okay, thank you. Sam, what are your thoughts on this? Next steps for folks.
Yeah, happy to. And Scott may have cheated a little with giving 2. I'm going to cheat a lot, but I'm going to cheat by first agreeing without the bias. You got to start with the logic model and really being clear on what's your why and how do you get there, and that logic model is your map. And then I'll agree with Scott too. I think you need to know what else is out there, what folks are doing, what's working, what's not working. It's a really quick moving space, and those patterns of what folks are using AI for and how. Not only do they give you an idea of where to start, but it also comes with the experience of, oh, here's what was hard about implementing this pattern and choosing this path. Here's what worked really well, and it can mean that you build on what others have done before, and it also helps you avoid a problem that I see a lot, which is like this magical thinking, like, oh, we're going to use AI. We'll just sprinkle some magic AI dust on it, and all of a sudden, all our dreams are going to come true. It's not quite that bad, but it can feel, almost divorced from reality, because there is just so much hype out there about what AI can do. And there are some things that AI can kind of do today, but maybe not like in a safe, secure, privacy preserving way or an entirely responsible way, but it's the frontier has some really interesting possibilities there. And so I think really looking at what others are doing and learning from their experience can help you sort of separate from that more magical thinking. And I think maybe stepping back even further, like there may be a point where your logic model is limiting your thinking. And I don't want to say this is every case, but within your logic model, there are all sorts of assumptions built in about how work happens, what activities lead to what outputs, what kind of investment or sort of inputs are required. And AI is transformational enough where some of those assumptions might need revisiting, and you might need to rethink what's possible. And I think, and I would hope, still anchored to your mission, your vision, still those things aren't changing, still anchored to how you best support your people to do their best work so that your program really shines and drives the results that you want to see. But at the end of the day, it might be that there are opportunities for new programs that you couldn't have imagined before, just because of what's possible at what scale, and at such a low cost, relatively speaking, versus doing it manually, so that it just might open up more opportunities. And you of course have to pursue those in a very responsible, thoughtful way, because of like Matt was saying before, you can move so quickly. There's a greater responsibility with that sort of greater power to move, at scale. But ultimately, your logic model is your starting point. You just also need to be able to step back and say, hey, have the rules of the game changed a bit because of what AI brings us?
I'm going to shift. I'm going to just shift the conversation for a moment to think about sort of how do you test whether an AI augmented program workflow is actually contributing to the outcome you care about? So let's move into that. Whoever would like to take the first stab at it, feel free. It's an important question.
Maybe I'll start with just a very practical example, but because again, it runs a similar theme to some of the other responses, which is you have to know what problem you're solving first. And so, as an example for us, we saw and heard from our direct service providers, our coaches, that they spent a lot of time on data entry, on administrative tasks, and they probably in some cases spent more time doing that than actually working with students. And so for us, the statement or challenge that we were trying to solve for was, how can we get coaches to spend more time with students? And kind of the inverse of that is how can we get them to spend less time on data entry and administrative tasks and things like that. And so for us, how we got there, because we heard that, but we wanted to actually validate that, we did a time study. And so we had our coaches fill out kind of a time card at the end of every week to say this is how they split up their work. And so we got a baseline broadly of how coaches spent their time. And then with that, plus the qualitative feedback about which tasks specifically were taking up their time, we targeted those as areas where this might be kind of a good spot to kind of try new solutions or innovate around kind of different AI strategies. And so once we were able to deploy those, on the one end, we were able just to test the workflows through user testing. Is this actually faster for you, coach, than what you previously done? And so you kind of have those micro tests. But then at some point, we've not done it yet, but at some point we do want to go back and do the time study again to see if the coaches are actually spending more time with the students now compared to what they were doing before. And that constant kind of iterative feedback loop of our stakeholders relative to the problem that we were trying to solve allows us to kind of dive in very specifically for that activity that we were trying to evaluate and change.
Thanks, Scott. Anything, Sam or Matt, would you like to add anything on that? And then we'll move to a question from Al-Nur Ibrahim.
I think just to emphasize the value of the basically the measurement fundamentals, which is a clear, accurate, reliable data collection and entry. It's you've got this clear sense of what a desired outcome looks like. You then implement this AI augmented solution. You then need to, as I'm hearing from Scott, really lean into what actual data collection is then implying about change in those outcomes. So I think sometimes that is an afterthought, but it really is crucial to have accurate, reliable data to be able to then see whether those tests of change are leading to the outcomes that you're hoping to see.
Perfect. Thank you, Sam. Anything else?
No, I think well said.
Okay, question from Al-Nur Ibrahim. Have any of the speakers seen a good use of AI visualization tools to create a theory of change that depicts a story of change rather than the usual linear logic model?
Man, the field really needs that, and I have not seen it. I don't know, Sam or Scott.
Yeah, I was pausing something this sounds like a Matt question. If anybody knows, Matt will know for sure. I have worked with one organization to try to do something like this, and it was kind of like a side of your desk type project, which is much more possible and doable now with AI these days. And I think what I saw is it really struggled because it's really more about your conceptual clarity and picking the right kind of version of a theory of change. Because a theory of change, unlike a logic model, there's so many different forms of theories of change floating out there. And some of them I think are terrible and confusing, and others are great. I would say look at guidance from Project Evident on that. I like their form of a theory of change. And I think once you have that sort of framework of what components you want in your theory of change and sort of what you want to include in each of those components to describe the theory of change for your organization, then I think you can work with really any of the major foundation models to kind of help you refine that and hone that and weave in how you might tell the story. But I don't think I've seen a tool that does that out of the box. And I don't know that I expect to see one soon either.
Do you recommend specifying the high-value programmatic tasks that AI integration is supposed to free up time for early on? Matt, you want to take that?
I do. So I recommend going through the process of identifying what high value programmatic tasks actually are. So I think this is exactly what we've talked about, being able to place on a logic model frame to connect the dots between your core activities and your desired outcomes, to then be in the space to say, what are those high value programmatic tasks?
Right.
The nuance I would put to then AI integration, yes or no, is it is very possible that those high value programmatic tasks need to be human first and human delivered. So I would not automatically assume that a high value programmatic task is to Sam's point, an AI shaped opportunity or an AI shaped problem. Now, I do think it is true that there is value in thinking of ways in which AI can free up time for staff that are involved in high value programmatic tasks, such that they can spend even more of their time on the human first delivery of those things.
In one
And
of
I
the
think
earlier
that's right.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go. No, you go.
No, in one of the earlier panels, Dr. Eve Shapiro from By12 had said discernment is the word of the hour. It's just there's human discernment that's needed for all of this. You can have tons of data, rapid iteration, but you need that human discernment throughout. So that seems relevant.
For sure. And I think I'd build on what Matt said before by saying, I think it can be harder to just say, oh, what are those high value programmatic tasks? I think it can be maybe helpful in clarifying as you're sort of defining your values around AI and where you will and won't use it, to first say, hey, what are the things that we don't want AI to do?
Okay.
And what are the things that we want to make sure that stay fundamentally sort of human led, human driven, and done by humans? And that can be an important conversation to have, maybe a quick conversation, but important conversation to have. and then I think that plus you looking at your staff saying, well, where do we think, like, what is the, that 20% of your work that drives 80% of the impact, like from your perspective? What things, I think it can also be, what things do you wish you could do and would be impactful or believe would be impactful, but you just don't have the capacity to do now or do as well as you would like to do? And so I think there it can be helpful from a change management perspective to get people, first saying like, no, this is what I think we can't let the bots do. We've got to do this. And then like, oh, I wish I could do more of this, or we could do this. So that way the folks will feel maybe more like, oh, I know that I'm protecting what I think is uniquely human. And also, oh, maybe I'm willing to learn a bit more about AI and try some new things, build it into my workflow, get fluent with some of these tools on the, efficiency, effectiveness side, or do things, go through systems changes that I otherwise would have found challenging to do. But if on the other side, it means, oh, I get to do that thing I'd been hoping to do, or I think will be really meaningful. I think that can be worth doing. So I love that.
And with that, my friends, we are at time. Sorry, there's more. I could do this forever with you guys. I've learned a ton. Thank you so much. But it's now time to move to what we call the lounge. If you look at the top left of your screen, there's an arrow, and you'll be able to find each of the panelists at a table, which their name will be listed there. You just click there and you can go to each of their tables to ask informal individual questions of them. A huge thank you to everybody who joined. A huge thank you to these panelists. You were wonderful. I learned so much. I'm very grateful to you for your time and for your insights. And with that, we are off.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tamar. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks all.